Dear members of the Soul Stories family, today we will bring you a romantic love story, so let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. Ruby Collins stood in the corner of the banquet hall, clutching a detailed planner, her eyes scanning the crowd. Shimmering ball gowns and impeccably tailored suits glided past, mingling with elegant laughter and the clink of champagne glasses. She adjusted her earpiece, her calm voice crackling through the radio. Lighting team, dim the chandelier by 10%. Floral team, check the centerpiece vase at the main table. One rose is out of place. This was the wedding of Emily Vanderbilt, her best friend from college, and Nathaniel Harrington, the young CEO of Harrington Enterprises. A wedding that was not just a union of two people, but a merger of two powerful families. Ruby had spent 3 months making this event perfect, from the smallest details like hand-embroidered tablecloths to a menu crafted by a Michelin-starred chef. But now, with only 4 hours until the ceremony, a bad feeling gnawed at her. "Ruby, where are you? I need you now." Margaret Harrington's voice, the groom's mother, cut through the earpiece, sharp and urgent. Ruby frowned, hurrying through the corridor toward the bride's preparation room. Margaret wasn't one to panic, so the tension in her voice set Ruby on edge. Pushing open the door, Ruby found Margaret standing by the vanity, holding a piece of paper, her face pale. The preparation room, meant to be filled with Emily's laughter and the bridesmaids' chatter, was eerily silent. Emily's stunning wedding dress hung alone on the rack, a stark reminder that something was wrong. "What's going on, Mrs. Harrington?" Ruby asked, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. Margaret handed her the paper, her hands trembling. "Emily, she's gone." Ruby blinked, unable to believe her ears. She took the letter, scanning Emily's shaky handwritten words. "I'm sorry, I can't do this. I need time. Don't look for me. Emily." "No way," Ruby whispered, feeling the floor shift beneath her. "She can't just leave like this. She loves Nate, doesn't she? I mean, they've been engaged for over a year." Margaret shook her head, her lips pressed tight. "It wasn't love, Ruby. It was duty. Edward arranged this marriage to align with the Vanderbilts. But now, oh God, if this wedding fails, Edward will never forgive Nathaniel." Ruby's stomach twisted. Edward Harrington, Nate's father, was a formidable man, notorious for his ruthless business tactics and harsh expectations of his son. She'd heard of Nate being summoned to his father's office only to be berated for a deal that fell short. A failed wedding, especially one as symbolic as this, would be catastrophic. "What do we do?" Ruby asked, trying to think. "Cancel the wedding? Tell the guests there's an issue?" "No!" Margaret nearly shouted, then lowered her voice, her eyes glinting with an idea. "We can't cancel. Edward is out there, bragging to his partners about this alliance. If the wedding doesn't happen, Nathaniel will lose everything. His CEO position, his father's respect, everything." Ruby stared at her, confused. "So what do we do? No bride, no wedding." Margaret gripped Ruby's hands, her eyes sharp but desperate. "You, Ruby, you'll be the bride." Time seemed to stop. Ruby's eyes widened, her mouth agape. You're joking, right? I'm the event planner, not the bride. I barely even know Nate." "No one knows Emily left," Margaret said quickly, her voice persuasive. "The veil will cover your face. You just need to walk down the aisle, say the vows, and sign the registry. Nathaniel will handle the rest. Just one night, Ruby, to save our family." Ruby shook her head, her heart pounding. "This is insane. I can't pretend to be the bride. What if someone finds out? What if Nate finds out?" "Nathaniel will agree," Margaret said firmly. "He knows the pressure of this family. And you, Ruby, are the only one I trust to do this. You've planned the entire wedding. You know every detail. No one is better suited than you." Ruby's mind reeled. She wanted to refuse, to run out of the room and forget this crazy idea. But then she thought of Nate, the man she'd only met a few times during planning meetings. He was always polite but distant, as if wearing a perfect mask. She remembered the weary look in his eyes when his father criticized him in front of others. If she didn't do this, Nate would face severe consequences. I don't know," Ruby muttered, her hands trembling. "This is wrong. I can't deceive everyone like this. Margaret gripped her shoulders, her eyes pleading. Ruby, think of Nathaniel. He doesn't deserve to be ruined for Emily's mistake, and I promise we'll compensate you. Anything you want, money, opportunities, anything. Ruby bit her lip, her thoughts in chaos. She didn't need money, but the idea of helping Nate and her own dream of traveling the world flashed through her mind. Part of her screamed that this was a mistake, but another part, the part always ready to face a challenge, whispered that she could do it. Just one night, Ruby asked, her voice faint. Just one night, Margaret confirmed, her eyes bright with hope. Ruby took a deep breath, feeling like she was stepping off a cliff. Fine, I'll do it, but if this falls apart, don't blame me. Margaret hugged her tightly, whispering thanks, but Ruby barely heard. Her heart pounded as if it might burst. She looked at the stunning wedding dress on the rack, feeling like it was staring back, daring her to step into a world that wasn't hers. Within 30 minutes, the bridesmaids helped Ruby into the dress, her hands shaking as they zipped it up. The gown hugged her tightly, sparkling with diamonds, making her feel both foreign and overwhelmed. When the veil was placed over her head, concealing her face, Ruby looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. She was no longer Ruby Collins, the event planner. She was the bride. Okay, Ruby, she told herself, her voice trembling. Just walk down the aisle, smile, say the vows, then everything will be fine. But as the wedding music began to play from the banquet hall and the doors to the ceremony opened, Ruby knew nothing was fine. Before her were hundreds of eyes, and at the end of the aisle, Nathaniel Harrington waited, the man about to become her husband in the biggest lie of her life. Ruby Collins walked down the red-carpeted aisle, the wedding bouquet trembling in her hands as if it might fall. The thick veil concealed her face, but it couldn't hide the pounding of her heart, beating like a drum. Hundreds of eyes from both sides, powerful business tycoons, media stars, the Harrington family, fixed on her, believing she was Emily Vanderbilt, Nathaniel Harrington's perfect bride. The soaring violin notes from the orchestra made her want to turn and flee, but the pearl-encrusted high heels and the heavy wedding gown anchored her to this fateful path. At the end of the aisle, Nathaniel Harrington stood tall, his broad shoulders clad in a tailored black tuxedo, his face as cold and chiseled as marble. He stared straight at her, his sharp eyes betraying no emotion. Ruby wondered if he suspected anything. How could he? Even she couldn't believe she was doing this. As she drew closer, Emily's father, or rather, the man who was supposed to be Nate's father-in-law, placed her hand in Nate's. His hand was ice cold, but the slight squeeze he gave startled her. She glanced through the veil, trying to read his expression, but he only nodded faintly, as if this were just another business deal among countless others. The ceremony began. The officiant, an elderly priest with a warm, resonant voice, spoke of love and commitment. Ruby tried to focus, but her mind spun. She repeated the vows as prompted, her voice trembling but masked by the solemn atmosphere. I, Emily Vanderbilt, take you, Nathaniel Harrington, to be my husband. Each word felt like a stab at her integrity. She wasn't Emily. She was Ruby, the event planner, not the bride in this insane scheme. When it came time to exchange rings, Nate took her hand, and for the first time, she sensed tension in him. He slid the sparkling diamond ring onto her finger, but his movements slowed, as if he were trying to confirm something. Ruby felt his gaze pierce through the veil, as if he could see right through her. She swallowed hard, praying he wouldn't notice anything amiss. But when she placed the ring on his finger, his hand hesitated, and a flicker of suspicion flashed in his deep blue eyes. Emily, he whispered, so low only she could hear. Ruby froze, not daring to respond, only nodding slightly, hoping the veil hid her panic. Nate's lips tightened, but he said nothing more. He continued the ceremony, his voice steady but laced with strain. When the priest declared them husband and wife, applause erupted, and Ruby felt like she'd just survived a storm. You may kiss the bride, the priest said, offering a kind smile. Ruby's heart raced. Kiss? No one mentioned this. She glanced at Nate, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. He slowly lifted the veil, and in the brief moment before it was fully raised, Ruby saw his face harden. He knew He knew she wasn't Emily. But Nate didn't stop. He leaned down, brushing a kiss as light as a feather on her cheek, just enough to satisfy the crowd without crossing a line. Applause rang out again, and Ruby exhaled, though her legs trembled beneath the heavy gown. That staged kiss, though merely a touch, sent her heart into a frenzy. The ceremony ended, and they walked out of the chapel amid cheers. Ruby forced a smile, mimicking Emily's graceful stride. Nate stayed close, silent but hovering, as if afraid she might bolt. When they reached the reception hall, camera flashes blinded her. She felt like an actor on a stage, with Nate as her reluctant co-star. The reception went smoothly, thanks to Ruby's meticulous planning. Dishes were served on time, the band played perfect melodies, and the guests seemed oblivious to any deception. But beneath the surface, Ruby sensed Nate's tension. He kept her close, his hand resting lightly on her back, but his eyes were icy. Finally, as the guests grew merry with champagne and dancing, Nate pulled her to a secluded corner behind the reception hall, where the lights were dim and the music a distant echo. He closed the door, and for the first time, they faced each other without an audience. "Who are you?" Nate asked, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "And don't tell me you're Emily, because I know you're not her." Ruby swallowed hard, her hands gripping the edge of her gown. I'm Ruby Collins, the event planner." Nate blinked as if he couldn't believe his ears. "The event planner? Are you kidding me? What are you doing in Emily's wedding dress?" Ruby took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Emily ran away. She left a note saying she couldn't go through with it. Your mother, Mrs. Margaret, she begged me to pose as the bride to save your family's reputation. I didn't want to do this, but she said you'd lose everything if the wedding failed." Nate turned away, running a hand through his dark hair, his face flushed with anger. "My mother? I can't believe this. And you? You went along with this farce? Do you have any idea what happens if someone finds out?" "I know," Ruby shot back, her voice louder than intended. "But I didn't have a choice. Your mother said your father would destroy you. I was just trying to help, okay? I don't want to be here, playing your bride any more than you want me here." Nate looked at her, his gaze softening slightly. He sighed, leaning against the wall, looking more exhausted than ever. "So now what? We just got married, in front of hundreds of people. What's your next plan, event planner?" Ruby shrugged, forcing a weak smile. "Well, I'm good at planning, but I've never planned a fake marriage. Maybe we keep up the act for the rest of the night? Then you can find Emily and sort this out?" Nate studied her as if weighing her words. After a moment, he nodded. "Fine, just tonight. But don't expect me to like this." Ruby smiled, though her heart still raced. "Trust me, I don't like it either. But at least you didn't have to really kiss me, right? That cheek kiss. Not bad." Nate raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at his lips for the first time all night. "You're funny, Ruby Collins. Too funny for this situation." "Someone's got to keep things light," she replied, shrugging. "Now, groom, shall we get back to the party? I don't want the guests thinking the newlyweds are fighting on their wedding night." Nate shook his head but opened the door, gesturing for her to go first. As they stepped back into the reception, the lights and laughter enveloped them again. But Ruby sensed a subtle shift. Their brief, awkward conversation had cracked the icy wall between them. She didn't know what would happen next, but for now, they were in this lie together. Ruby Collins stood in the middle of the sprawling living room, clutching a small suitcase packed with a few clothes and personal items. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, but she felt only a chill. The emerald gown she'd worn at the wedding had been replaced by comfortable clothes, jeans and an oversized sweater. But she still felt out of place in this unfamiliar space. Just hours ago, she'd been Nathaniel Harrington's reluctant bride, and now she stood in his home, facing a proposal even crazier than posing at the wedding. Nate sat on a black leather sofa, still in his tuxedo, but with the top button of his shirt undone, revealing a hint of tan skin at his neck. He held a glass of whiskey, his sharp eyes scanning her as if sizing up an opponent in a boardroom. "You okay, Ruby?" he asked, his voice low. Not exactly caring, but breaking the silence. "Okay, I just pretended to be your bride, fooled hundreds of people, And now I'm standing in the most expensive penthouse in New York with no idea what's going on. How do you think I'm doing? Ruby shot back, her tone laced with sarcasm. She crossed her arms, trying to hide her unease. Nate raised an eyebrow, a faint smile flickering across his lips before vanishing. You've got a sense of humor, I'll give you that. But we need to talk seriously. Ruby dragged her suitcase closer to the opposite sofa and sat down, keeping a safe distance. Fine, talk. Your mother called me right after the reception, told me to come here. I'm guessing you have a plan, right? Nate set his whiskey glass on the glass coffee table and leaned back, his gaze never leaving her. I need you to keep playing my wife. Not just tonight, but for a few weeks, maybe longer. Ruby blinked, her mouth falling open. You're kidding, right? I already did the craziest thing in my life walking down that aisle. Now you want me to live as your wife? No way! Nate raised a hand, signaling her to calm down. Hear me out. Emily's gone, and my family, especially my father, won't tolerate the humiliation if the truth comes out. This marriage isn't just personal, it's tied to a billion-dollar deal with the Vanderbilts. If I admit the real bride ran off, everything collapses. I need time to find Emily and fix this. Ruby shook her head, her curly hair spilling over her shoulders. Then find her. I'm not a professional actress, Nate. I'm an event planner, not a stand-in for a runaway bride. I get it, Nate said, his voice steady but firm. But you're the only one who knows the truth. And you did an incredible job tonight. No one suspected a thing. I'll make it worth your while. Ruby narrowed her eyes, wary. Worth my while? Are you trying to bribe me? Call it a fair deal, Nate replied, standing and walking to the window, gazing at the glittering city below. I know you have dreams. Traveling the world, right? The Northern Lights, the Sahara Desert, temples in Kyoto. I overheard you at the reception when you thought no one was listening. Ruby flushed, caught off guard that he remembered details she'd casually mentioned to a guest. That's none of your business, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Nate turned back, his expression serious. I'll pay you $1 million. Enough for you to go anywhere, do anything. In return, you live here, play my wife in front of my family and the public, until I find Emily or figure out how to end the engagement without ruining everything. $1 million. The number rang in Ruby's mind like a bell. With that money, she could chase every dream, sunsets in Santorini, trekking the Andes. But the cost was living a lie, staying with a man she barely knew, in a high-stakes world. She bit her lip, torn. And if I say no? She asked, her voice quiet. Nate shrugged, but his eyes were cold. You can walk away, but I'm not sure my mother will keep quiet about your role tonight. And if the truth gets out, what do you think happens to the reputation of an event planner like you? Ruby clenched her fists, angry at being cornered. Are you threatening me? No, Nate said, his tone softer. I'm begging you. You may not believe me, but I don't want to force anyone into anything. I'm in a mess, and you're the only one who can help. The sincerity in his voice made Ruby pause. She looked at him, noticing for the first time the exhaustion on his face, the faint shadows under his eyes, the slight slump in his shoulders despite his polished facade. She knew he wasn't lying. Nathaniel Harrington, the man who seemed to have it all, was trapped in his own life. Fine, she said at last, her voice shaky. I'll do it. But we need rules. This isn't some cheap rom-com. I don't want things crossing any lines. Nate nodded, returning to the sofa and grabbing a sheet of paper from the table. Agreed. Write down what you want. They sat across from each other, the tension easing slightly as they began setting rules. Ruby wrote quickly, no physical contact unless necessary in public, no interfering in each other's personal lives, and the arrangement ends as soon as Emily is found or another solution arises. Nate added, she'd have her own room, full access to the house's amenities, and he'd ensure her privacy. When they signed the paper, Ruby felt like she'd just signed a sentence. She looked at Nate, who was loosening his tie, his movements slow and weary. The tie fell to the floor and he leaned back, closing his eyes, revealing a rare moment of vulnerability. The dim light highlighted his sharp features, but also exposed the exhaustion he always hid. You okay? Ruby asked impulsively, her voice soft. Nate opened his eyes, a flicker of surprise in his gaze. You care? Not really, she said, shrugging to hide her embarrassment. You just look like you ran a marathon in that tux. He let out a low, tired laugh. You have no idea, Ruby. Living with my family is like running a marathon every day. And today was a long one. His words struck a chord in Ruby. She realized that despite his wealth and glamorous penthouse, he was as trapped as she was. But she said nothing, standing and pulling her suitcase toward the guest room. Good night, groom, she said, her tone lightly teasing to cut through the heavy air. Good night, bride, Nate replied, his eyes glinting with something, maybe curiosity or just exhaustion. As Ruby closed the guest room door, she leaned against it, her heart pounding. She'd just agreed to live a lie bigger than herself. But deep down, she felt a strange curiosity about Nathaniel Harrington, the man behind the perfect mask and the secrets he carried. If you were Ruby, would you trade your freedom for $1 million? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more meaningful stories. Ruby Collins stood before the mirror in the guest room of Nate's penthouse, adjusting the wine-red evening gown that shimmered under the lights. It had been a week since the fake wedding, and she still wasn't used to playing Mrs. Nathaniel Harrington in public. Tonight was a charity gala, where she and Nate had to appear as the perfect couple to quell any doubts from family and the press. Nate knocked and entered, dressed in a black tuxedo, his face impassive, but his gaze lingering on her for a moment. You ready? He asked, his tone even. Ruby forced a smile, smoothing her hair. Ready as an actor before opening night. Just hoping no one asks about our honeymoon plans. Nate's lips twitched, a rare smile. Say we're considering Paris. People love hearing that. They stepped into the Plaza Hotel's banquet hall, where chandeliers glowed and elegant laughter filled the air. Ruby held Nate's arm, feeling the warmth of his hand, though his grip was more formal than affectionate. She smiled brightly, shaking hands with guests and answering questions about the wedding of the century with natural charm. Oh, Nate was wonderful. He surprised me with my favorite flowers right before the ceremony, she told a group of women, fully aware it was a lie. Ruby's confidence disarmed even the most skeptical Harringtons. Nate's sister, Eleanor, a sharp-witted woman always digging for flaws, even laughed when Ruby shared a humorous story about choosing the wedding cake. My new sister-in-law has some wit, Eleanor said, making Ruby exhale in relief. But what caught Nate's attention was how Ruby found joy in small moments. At an outdoor party at the Harrington family estate, while guests were busy with champagne and chatter, Ruby slipped away to the garden, where moonlight bathed the rose beds. She twirled, her emerald dress flowing, as if dancing with the light itself. Nate, watching from a distance, felt an unfamiliar stir in his chest. He'd never seen anyone live so fully in a moment. After a family dinner, as everyone moved to the drawing room for drinks, a guest pulled Ruby into a conversation about travel. Where have you been, Mrs. Harrington? He asked, eyes curious. Ruby smiled, her eyes sparkling. Not enough places, I'm afraid, but I've always dreamed of seeing the northern lights in Iceland. There's something magical about standing under a blazing sky, like the universe is telling a story. Nate, nearby with a glass of wine, paused. He listened, drawn in by her passionate voice. She spoke of her dreams, not just the northern lights, but the stone paths of Machu Picchu, the floating markets of Bangkok. Unlike the women he'd known, who measured every word, Ruby spoke with a sincerity that held his gaze. When the guest left, Nate approached, his voice low. The northern lights, huh? You really think they're worth flying hours to a freezing place? Ruby shrugged, her smile playful. Absolutely. Haven't you ever wanted to do something just because it makes your heart race? Nate looked at her, his eyes deep. For the first time, he felt an inexplicable pull, as if Ruby were a puzzle he wanted to solve. Maybe, he said softly, I just haven't found the reason yet. The sun set over the Hamptons beach, painting the sky a fiery orange. Ruby stood on the balcony of the guest room, breathing in the salty sea air, trying to shake off the stifling feeling from the family dinner. Nate's father, Edward, had peppered her with questions about their future plans, while Nate's mother, Margaret, subtly reminded her to maintain the perfect facade. Ruby felt like she was walking a tightrope, one misstep away from falling. Nate knocked and entered, dressed more casually. A white dress shirt and slacks, sleeves rolled up to reveal toned forearms. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft but still distant. Ruby turned, forcing a smile. "Fine if you don't count your dad staring at me like I'm a contract to be signed. He's terrifying." Nate chuckled, the warm sound catching her off guard. "Welcome to my world. My father thinks everything's a deal, even people." They were required to stay at the estate for the weekend, and the forced proximity made them confront each other more. Over 2 days, Ruby noticed Nate wasn't just a cold CEO. He quietly helped an elderly gardener pick up tools, patiently listened to his uncle's rambling stories, and even joked with young cousins during a backyard game. These moments sparked her curiosity about the real him. On the second night, unable to sleep, Ruby wandered to the living room, where a fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. She curled up in an armchair, cradling a mug of hot cocoa, staring into the flames as her thoughts churned. Memories of an old love, who left her because she was too free, resurfaced, making her question if she truly belonged anywhere. Nate appeared, his hair slightly mussed, shirt wrinkled. "Can't sleep?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. "No," Ruby replied, shrugging. "Just thinking too much." "You?" "My father called. Another lecture on duty," Nate said, his voice weary. He stared into the fire, his gaze distant. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever live for myself." His words made Ruby pause. She tilted her head, curious. "Tell me about it. What was your childhood like? Growing up in a family like this?" "It can't have been easy." Nate gave a faint smile, but his eyes were sad. "It wasn't. I was taught every decision had to serve the family, the company. When I was 10, I wanted to learn guitar. My father said it was a waste of time and made me study finance instead. Everything was planned. My school, my career, even who I'd marry." Ruby's heart tightened. "So you never rebelled? Did something just because you wanted to?" Nate looked at her, his gaze softening. "I'm jealous of you, Ruby. You live like the world's your playground. You've got scars, don't deny it. I see how you dodge talking about your past. But you still choose freedom." Ruby blinked, startled by how he saw through her. She took a deep breath, deciding to open up. "I loved someone once. He said I was too wild, not cut out for a stable life. When he left, I swore I'd never let anyone or anything hold me back. But sometimes I wonder if freedom's really enough." The air between them grew intimate, as if the fire warmed not just the room but melted their barriers. Nate leaned closer, his eyes locked on hers. "You're enough, Ruby. More than enough." Ruby's heart raced. He was closer now, their breaths mingling. She felt an undeniable pull, and when he reached to touch her cheek, she nearly leaned into him. But just as their lips were inches apart, footsteps sounded. Eleanor appeared at the door, her voice surprised. "Oh, you two are still up?" Ruby and Nate sprang apart, faces flushed. "Just talking," Ruby said quickly, standing. "I'm heading to bed." As she left, she felt Nate's gaze follow her, her heart still pounding. Ruby Collins stood by the large glass window in Nate's penthouse, gazing at the twinkling city traffic below. A week had passed since the Hamptons weekend, and the memory of their almost kiss by the fireplace still made her heart race whenever it crossed her mind. She tried to keep her distance from Nate, focusing on playing Mrs. Harrington at social events, but their unavoidable closeness was making things increasingly complicated. Nate entered the living room, his white shirt sleeves rolled up, looking more relaxed than usual. "Planning to stare at the city all night?" he asked, his tone lightly teasing. Ruby turned, shrugging to hide her unease. "Just figuring out how to survive another high society party. What's this week? Charity gala or your dad's cocktail soiree?" Nate's lips quirked, his eyes glinting. "No parties. I've got a night off, but if you're up for it, I know a place." Ruby raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You, taking me out? Not a board meeting or contract signing?" "Don't make me change my mind," Nate replied, grabbing his jacket. "Come on, Collins." Wear comfortable shoes. 30 minutes later, Ruby found herself at a street food festival in Brooklyn, where the aromas of grilled tacos, steamed buns, and homemade ice cream mingled in the air. Vibrant stalls glowed with lights, Latin music pulsed, and the lively crowd made her feel more alive than ever. Nate, in a black tee and jeans, looked out of place yet oddly captivating in this casual setting. "This was your idea?" Ruby asked, holding a fish taco. "Nathaniel Harrington, the icy millionaire, likes street food?" Nate shrugged, biting into a pulled pork sandwich. "I grew up in New York. It wasn't always caviar and champagne." Ruby laughed, pulling him to a churro stand. "All right, groom, try these. If you don't like them, I'll call you boring for life." Nate took a churro, bit into it, and his eyes lit up. "Not bad," he admitted, making Ruby clap like a kid. Her spontaneity chipped away at his guarded demeanor. They wandered through the stalls, sampling everything, even pausing to watch street performers dance hip-hop. For the first time, Nate laughed freely, and Ruby felt her heart lighten. As the sun set, they sat on a bench by the Hudson River, watching the water reflect Manhattan's lights. Ruby cradled a hot coffee, a rare calm settling over her. "Thank you," she said softly. "Tonight, it was amazing. I didn't think you could be this fun." Nate looked at her, his gaze deep. "Neither did I, but you have a way of changing things." His words made Ruby blush. She looked away, pretending to focus on her coffee, but her heart pounded. The growing closeness between them was impossible to ignore, and she feared she was stepping into dangerous territory. A few days later, during a quiet evening at the penthouse, Ruby decided to cook as a thank you for the festival outing. She prepared a simple dinner, homemade tomato pasta and salad, in Nate's sleek kitchen. Nate, just back from the office, was surprised to find her in an apron, softly singing a pop song while stirring sauce. "You cook?" he asked, leaning against the counter, eyes curious. Ruby grinned, waving a wooden spoon. "I know a lot of things, Mr. Harrington. Sit down. Chef Collins is serving." They ate at the ebony dining table, candles Ruby lit, casting a warm glow. Conversation flowed naturally, from Ruby's small-town childhood memories to Nate's tales of sneaking out of dull family galas. For the first time, they talked not as two people bound by a deal, but as friends, or something more. After dinner, they cleaned up together, and Ruby teased Nate when he clumsily dropped a plate. "You're a CEO, but can't wash dishes?" she laughed, nudging his shoulder. Nate shot her a playful look, splashing a bit of soapy water on her face. Ruby yelped, feigning outrage, and they both burst into laughter, the air light and carefree. As the laughter faded, they stood closer, eyes locked. The kitchen felt smaller, filled only with the sound of their heartbeats. Nate reached out, gently wiping a drop of water from Ruby's cheek. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met," he whispered, his voice warm. Ruby's breath caught. She knew she should step back, remind them of their rules, but her body wouldn't listen. Nate leaned in, and this time no one interrupted. His lips met hers, soft at first, tentative. But when Ruby kissed back, it deepened, fueled by pent-up longing. His hand slid into her hair, pulling her closer, and the world melted away, leaving only his warmth. But like a bolt of lightning, fear surged in Ruby. This wasn't real. It was a charade, and she was falling for an illusion. She pushed him away, gasping, eyes brimming with tears. "We can't," she said, voice trembling. "This isn't real, Nate. I'm just a stand-in." Nate looked at her, his eyes pained but resolute. "Ruby, it's real to me. You're not a stand-in. You're the one making me want to live differently." His words cut into her heart. Ruby shook her head, stepping back. "I need time," she whispered, then fled to her room, slamming the door. She leaned against it, tears streaming down. She was terrified. Terrified she was falling in love, and even more terrified that love would shatter when Emily returned. In the living room, Nate stood alone, fists clenched. That kiss had awakened something in him, not just desire, but hope. He knew Ruby was scared, but he also knew he couldn't let her go. He resolved to prove his feelings weren't a game, no matter the challenges ahead. Ruby Collins stood in her private bedroom at Nate's penthouse, the city lights streaming through the window, casting a glow on the open suitcase on her bed. 2 weeks had passed since the passionate kiss in the kitchen, and she still couldn't shake the bittersweet ache it left behind. She tried to keep her distance from Nate, only appearing by his side at public events, but every glance, every accidental touch, sent her heart into chaos. She knew she was falling in love with him, and that terrified her more than anything. Meanwhile, Nate sat in his office at Harrington Enterprises, the computer screen's light highlighting the tense lines of his face. A stack of documents about the Vanderbilt deal sat before him, but his mind wandered. The kiss with Ruby had changed everything. He no longer saw her as part of their agreement, but as the woman he wanted by his side. Before he could tell her, a call from his mother, Margaret, turned his world upside down. "Nathaniel, Emily's back," Margaret said over the phone, her voice a mix of relief and worry. "She's at our house. She wants to see you and apologize." Nate gripped the phone, feeling the floor shift beneath him. "Emily, where has she been?" "Paris, it seems. She said she panicked before the wedding, but is ready to resume the engagement. Your father wants you to meet her tonight." Nate closed his eyes, his mind reeling. Emily's return came just as things with Ruby were becoming clear. He agreed to go to his parents' house, but his heart was heavy. He didn't want to see Emily. He wanted to go home, tell Ruby he loved her, and make their charade real. At the Harrington family estate, Emily Vanderbilt sat on the sofa, her white silk dress clinging to her, her beautiful face pale. "Nate, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I was scared. The wedding, the pressure, everything. I wasn't ready, but I've thought it through, and I want to make this right. I want us to move forward." Nate looked at her, feeling a strange detachment. Emily was once the woman he'd agreed to marry out of duty, but now his heart belonged to Ruby, the woman who brought light into his life. "Emily, things have changed," he said, his voice low. "I can't go back to how it was." Edward Harrington, his father, rose from his armchair, his eyes icy. "Don't be foolish, Nathaniel. The marriage to Emily is the key to the Vanderbilt deal. That girl, Ruby, is a temporary mistake. You'll divorce her and marry Emily if you know what's good for the company." Nate clenched his fists, anger surging. "Ruby isn't a mistake. She's the only one who makes me feel like I'm living, not just existing." Margaret intervened, her voice soft but firm. "Nate, think of the family. Emily's back, and she's the right choice. Ruby, she doesn't belong in this world." Her words cut into Nate's heart. He left the estate, his mind in turmoil. His family was partly right. Ruby didn't fit into their world of pressure and schemes, but he also knew he couldn't live without her. Back at the penthouse, Ruby received a text from Margaret, brief but brutal. "Emily's back. She and Nathaniel will reconcile. Thank you for helping us, Ruby. Please leave before things get more complicated." Ruby read the message, feeling her heart shatter. She didn't blame Emily. She was the real bride, the one Nate was meant to marry. But the pain overwhelmed her. She thought of their kiss, their shared moments, and wondered if it was all a fantasy. She felt like an outsider in Nate's life. With trembling hands, Ruby began packing. She folded her clothes, leaving behind the wine-red gala gown, as if it belonged to a version of herself she couldn't keep. Each item in the suitcase felt like a cut to her heart. She didn't want to leave, but she believed Nate would be happier with Emily, in the world he belonged to. Before leaving, Ruby sat at the dining table where they'd laughed over pasta. She took a piece of paper and wrote, tears streaming down her face. "Nate, I'm not good at goodbyes, but I have to go. Emily's back, and I know she's who you need, not just for your family, but because she belongs in this world and I don't. Thank you for the moments we shared. They were more real than anything I've ever had. Live well, and if you can, find some freedom for yourself." Ruby. She left the letter on the table, next to a dried bouquet from their fake wedding she'd kept by accident. Wiping her tears, she pulled her suitcase to the door and left the penthouse without looking back. As the door closed, she felt like she'd left a piece of her heart behind. Nate sped back to the penthouse, determined to tell Ruby the truth, that he loved her, that he didn't want Emily or any deal. But when he opened the door, the apartment was eerily silent. He called her name, his voice hoarse with worry. "Ruby, where are you?" He rushed to her room, finding her suitcase gone. On the dining table, her letter lay like a silent farewell. Nate grabbed it, reading each line, his heart constricting. She'd left, thinking it was best for him, but she didn't know she was the best thing that ever happened to him. He crumpled the letter, anger and pain mixing. He couldn't let her go. Not like this. He grabbed his phone, calling his assistant, ordering them to find Ruby at all costs. But deep down, he knew finding her wasn't enough. He had to prove his love was real, and he was ready to give up everything to keep her. Are you still following the story? Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your feedback to make future stories even better. And please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much. Nathaniel Harrington stood outside the family boardroom, clutching Ruby's letter, her heartfelt words etched into his mind. After reading it and discovering she'd left the penthouse, a painful void had settled in his chest. He'd called his assistant, demanding they search for Ruby everywhere, her apartment, hotels, even airports. But before he could find her, he knew he had to confront the source of all the pressure, his family. Inside the boardroom, Edward Harrington sat at the head of the table, his gaze as cold as ever, with Margaret, Nate's mother, beside him, her face a mix of worry and forced calm. Emily Vanderbilt sat across, her white silk dress making her look like a perfect portrait, though her eyes betrayed unease. Eleanor, Nate's sister, stood by the window, observing with quiet curiosity. "Nathaniel, sit down," Edward commanded, his voice low but commanding. "We need to discuss divorcing that girl and arranging the wedding with Emily." Nate didn't sit. He stood tall, his eyes blazing with resolve. Ruby's letter in his pocket was a reminder that he could no longer live for others' expectations. "No divorce, and no wedding with Emily," he said firmly, silencing the room. Edward's brow furrowed, his hand slamming the table. "What are you talking about? You think this is a game? The Vanderbilt deal hinges on this marriage. You can't throw away your duty for some event planner." Nate felt anger surge, but this time he didn't hold back. "Duty? You call forcing me to marry someone I don't love duty? I've lived 33 years by your rules. The school you chose, the company you built, even agreeing to marry Emily because you wanted it. But I'm done. I won't live another day for your expectations." Margaret gasped, clutching her chest. "Nate, calm down. We only want what's best for you. Emily is the right choice. Ruby, she doesn't belong in this world." Nate turned to his mother, his gaze softer but resolute. "Mom, Ruby's the only one who makes me feel alive, not just existing. She doesn't care about my money or status. She makes me want to be a better man. I love her." Emily bit her lip, her voice trembling. "Nate, I'm sorry for running away. I thought we could fix things. But if you really love her, I won't stand in your way." Nate looked at Emily, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Emily. I hope you find happiness, but it's not with me." Edward shot up, his face red. "You dare defy me? Choose that girl, and you'll lose everything. Your CEO position, your shares, everything. Who do you think you are to challenge this family?" Nate gave a faint smile, feeling free for the first time. "I'm Nathaniel Harrington, and I choose myself. I resign as CEO, effective immediately. You can find someone else to run the company. I don't need it to live the life I want." The room fell silent. Margaret covered her mouth, tears in her eyes, while Eleanor raised an eyebrow, a spark of admiration in her gaze. Edward stared, as if unable to believe his son had crossed that line. "You'll regret this," he growled. "Maybe," Nate replied calmly, "but at least it'll be my choice." He turned and left the room, not looking back. Ruby's letter in his pocket was like a guiding flame, urging him forward. Meanwhile, Ruby sat in her small Brooklyn apartment, where she'd returned after leaving the penthouse. The cream-colored walls and bookshelves, filled with travel guides, now felt foreign, as if she no longer belonged. Her suitcase was packed again. A plane ticket to Iceland, where she dreamed of seeing the northern lights, lay on the table. She'd decided to leave New York, to travel the world and forget Nate and the ache in her heart. But as she looked at a photo from the street food festival, a rare moment of Nate laughing brightly, tears fell. She told herself leaving was right, that Nate needed Emily and his world. But deep down, she longed for him to find her, to say she was enough. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nate's assistant. "Ms. Collins, Mr. Harrington is looking for you." "Where are you?" Ruby stared at the message, her heart pounding, but she didn't reply. She couldn't afford hope, couldn't face the pain if he was only seeking her to say goodbye. She stood, wiped her tears, and pulled her suitcase to the door, heading for JFK Airport. Nate sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, when his assistant called back. "Ms. Collins didn't respond, but I checked. She booked a flight to Iceland, leaving tonight from JFK at 9:30 p.m. Nate glanced at the clock, 8:15 p.m. He floored the gas, weaving through Manhattan's crowded streets, his heart racing. He'd given up his CEO role, defied his father, and now had one goal: find Ruby before she left his life forever. He didn't know if she'd forgive him or believe in his love, but he had to try. New York's rush hour traffic was a nightmare, but Nate maneuvered through, sweat beading on his forehead. He thought of Ruby's letter, how she'd sacrificed her happiness, thinking he'd be better off without her. He cursed himself for not speaking sooner, for not holding her when she needed him most. When he reached JFK, the clock read 9:10 p.m. He sprinted into the terminal, scanning the crowd for Ruby's curly hair and petite frame. The bustling travelers and blaring flight announcements heightened his urgency, a vice gripping his chest. He couldn't let her go, not when he'd just found the reason to live for himself. Nathaniel Harrington burst through the main terminal doors at JFK Airport, his heart pounding as if it might break through his chest. The clock on his wrist read 9:15 p.m., just 15 minutes before Ruby's flight to Iceland was set to depart. The crowd of passengers, the clatter of rolling suitcases, and the blaring announcements for flights made him feel like he was running through a nightmare. But he couldn't stop. Not after resigning as CEO, defying his father, and realizing Ruby was the only thing that truly mattered. He scanned the terminal, searching for Ruby's curly brown hair and petite frame. The overhead digital board indicated her Reykjavik flight was at Gate 23 in the international security area. Nate raced toward the check-in counters, but the long lines made him despair. He had no ticket, no way to bypass security and reach the gate. He called her name, his voice hoarse with desperation, but the airport's noise drowned him out. "Ruby!" he shouted, ignoring the curious glances from passers-by. He pushed through the crowd, running along the check-in area, hoping to spot her before she passed through security. Meanwhile, Ruby Collins stood in the security checkpoint area, her small suitcase checked and her boarding pass trembling in her hand. Dressed in a gray sweater and a green scarf, she tried to hide her red, tear-streaked eyes. Leaving New York to start her world-traveling journey was a dream she'd long held, but now each step toward the gate felt like a stab to her heart. She thought of Nate, his rare smile, their passionate kitchen kiss, and the letter she'd left, hoping he'd find happiness with Emily. Deep down, though, she longed for him to chase her, to say she was the one he chose. The loudspeaker announced her flight. "Passengers for Reykjavik, please proceed to Gate 23. The flight will depart in 10 minutes. Ruby took a deep breath, wiped her tears, and walked toward the gate, telling herself this was the right thing. She didn't belong in Nate's world, and she couldn't bear staying to watch him live with someone else. Nate, nearly frantic, reached the airport information desk. He pulled out his wallet, grabbing his credit card and ID, pleading with the staff. "I need to get to Gate 23. I'm not boarding. I just need to find someone. Please, she's leaving." The employee, a middle-aged woman, eyed him with skepticism but also empathy. "Sir, I can't let you through security without a ticket, but I can make a PA announcement. What's her name?" "Ruby Collins," Nate said quickly, his voice urgent. "Please call her. Say Nathaniel Harrington is waiting at the security checkpoint." The employee nodded, picked up the microphone, and her voice echoed through the terminal. "Passenger Ruby Collins, please proceed to the security checkpoint area. Mr. Nathaniel Harrington is waiting for you." Nate stood there, fists clenched, eyes fixed on the crowd. Each second felt like a century. He feared Ruby had already passed the gate, that she hadn't heard the announcement, that he'd lost her forever. Ruby had just reached the boarding gate area when she heard the PA system. Her name rang out, and her heart stopped when she heard Nathaniel Harrington. She turned, her eyes wide with confusion. He was here? Why? She hesitated, her boarding pass a reminder of her dream of freedom. But her heart spoke louder, and she ran back through the crowd toward the security area. As she neared, she saw Nate standing in the middle of the terminal, his shirt wrinkled, hair disheveled, eyes desperately scanning the crowd. "Ruby!" he called, his voice raw. "Nate!" she whispered, stepping forward, her legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. He saw her, and in that moment, the world seemed to freeze. Nate rushed to her, grabbing her hands and pulling her into his arms. "Ruby, don't go," he said, his voice trembling. "I can't let you go. I love you. Not Emily, not anyone else, only you." Ruby looked at him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Nate, I don't belong in your world. Your family, Emily, I'm just part of the act." "No," Nate cut in, his hands tightening on hers. "I resigned as CEO. I told my father I choose you. I want a life where we're both free to love, to live the way we want. You're my dream, Ruby, not the Northern Lights or anywhere else." His words shattered the walls around Ruby's heart. She looked into his eyes, seeing sincerity and resolve, and knew he meant it. She sobbed, but this time from joy. "Nate, are you sure?" "Surer than anything in my life," he replied, pulling her closer. Amid the curious crowd and airport announcements, he leaned down and kissed her, a deep, fervent kiss full of longing and promise. Ruby kissed back, her arms wrapping around his neck, her fears melting away. The kiss sealed their reunion amidst the chaos of the terminal, as if the universe itself was celebrating. When they pulled apart, Ruby smiled through her tears. "Guess the flight to Iceland will have to wait." Nate grinned, wiping a tear from her cheek. "We'll go there together, and anywhere else you want, just stay with me." They embraced, the final boarding call for Ruby's flight echoing, but she didn't care. She'd found where she belonged, not in a destination, but in Nate's arms. The sunset bathed the meadow surrounding the small chapel in golden light, where Ruby Collins stood before a mirror in the preparation room. Her wedding dress was simple yet elegant, soft white silk hugging her frame, adorned with delicate lace details. There was no veil or panic like the first time she'd posed as a bride. This time, she was herself, ready to enter a real marriage with Nathaniel Harrington, the man she loved. Outside, Nate stood under an arch of wildflowers, wearing a light gray suit, free of the stiffness of his former CEO persona. He chatted with close friends and family, his eyes sparkling with joy. This wedding was worlds apart from the lavish spectacle of before. Only about 30 guests, those who truly cared for them, with no press or family pressure. Nate's parents, though reluctantly, were present, a first sign of acceptance after his tense confrontation. Ruby stepped out, holding a bouquet of carnations, and when her eyes met Nate's, they both smiled, as if all past struggles were a dream. He took her hand, whispering, "You're more beautiful than the Northern Lights." Ruby laughed, her cheeks flushing, and they walked to the officiant, ready for their true vows. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. Nate gazed into Ruby's eyes, his voice warm with his vow. "Ruby, you taught me that living isn't just existing, it's finding joy in the smallest moments. I promise to stand by you wherever we go and to choose you every day." Ruby, eyes glistening, replied, "Nate, you gave me a place to belong without losing myself. I promise to write adventures with you and love you forever." As they exchanged rings and kissed to applause, Ruby felt a completeness she'd never known. This kiss wasn't for show or pretense. It was a promise for the future they'd build together. After the wedding, they held a small outdoor reception with rustic wooden tables laden with homemade food and lanterns hanging softly. Ruby and Nate shared their first dance under the moonlight, a gentle acoustic song playing from a local band. She rested her head on his shoulder, whispering, "This is the wedding I always dreamed of." Nate kissed her forehead, replying, "And this is the beginning I never dared to dream." Months later, Nate and Ruby founded Wanderlust Events, a travel-focused event company blending their passions, Ruby's meticulous planning and their shared love of freedom. They crafted unique experiences, from stargazing camps in Patagonia to beach weddings in Bali, helping clients explore the world authentically. The company thrived, not just for its creative vision, but because their love and synergy inspired everyone around them. One early morning, Ruby and Nate stood by a vintage green convertible, luggage packed in the trunk, ready for their first joint adventure, a road trip along the U.S. West Coast. The sea breeze tousled Ruby's curly hair. Dressed in a white tee and jeans, her eyes gleamed as she looked at the open road ahead. Nate, in a linen shirt and sunglasses, looked relaxed and freer than ever. They paused on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, waves crashing below. Ruby leaned into Nate, their hands tightly clasped. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" she asked softly. Nate looked at her, his eyes full of love. "Never, but you changed everything, Ruby. You're why I believe in the impossible." She smiled, nestling closer. "Where to next? After this?" "The Northern Lights," Nate answered instantly, making her laugh. "Then anywhere you want, as long as we're together." They stood in silence, the sound of waves blending with their heartbeats. In that peaceful moment, they made a silent vow, not with words, but with their tight grip and steadfast gazes, to always choose each other no matter where the road led. Ruby felt her heart lighten, as if all past constraints had dissolved, leaving an open future. As they climbed back into the car and drove on, the sun rose on the horizon, illuminating the road ahead. Ruby turned on the radio, a cheerful song filling the air, and she sang along, making Nate laugh loudly. The convertible sped forward, carrying two people who'd found freedom and love in each other, ready for new adventures.